Hey, good morning, everyone. I have been off social media for a while, and honestly, I have kept really quiet for a reason. But this was a really big week, and just wanted to share it with you guys. So, the case and the charges with my brother are now finished. He had his sentencing this week, and I just wanted to just share my heart and really where we kind of landed with everything. So the initial felonies that my brother was charged with for the abuse that had occurred while he was an adult, each of those felonies carried a 10 to 30 years to life sentence. So sexual abuse with this nature carries an indeterminate sentence, meaning that he was facing potentially the rest of his life in prison. And honestly, it took me a while to get to the point where I believed that was just, and that if he spent the rest of his life in prison, that was appropriate for the crimes that he committed and the hurt and the pain that he caused. And so throughout the process, another thing that was, I guess, kind of something I had no clue that it would go like this was that the district attorney's office would basically allow me to kind of dictate the direction and what they pursued. And so they had let me know that we could offer a deal if a trial was something that I didn't feel like I could go through with. And, honestly, I feel like when I first came forward with this abuse around 8 years ago, I wasn't ready for that. But I was at the point where I was totally willing to go to trial to stand up for myself, because I feel like that's something that never happened for me. My parents didn't stand up for me, and I was ready to stand up for myself. And so that's the track that I was on, and was willing to go to trial and willing to see it through. And they asked if I wanted to offer him a deal, and at first I said absolutely not. And then I got to the point where I said, okay, well, I'm willing to take the indeterminate portion off of his sentence. So that way he's not facing potentially the rest of his life in prison. He would have a set term, serve 80% of that, and have the chance of getting out. And so that's really where I was at. And a day before they were going to send the offer to his attorney to take off the indeterminate portion, which they prepared me that that's probably something he wouldn't take, and that we were going to trial, because that would be guaranteeing, if he pled guilty to that he would for sure be spending a long time in prison. And so the day before they actually submitted the offer, that night I could not sleep. And usually I'm a really good sleeper. I can lay my head down and I fall right asleep, but I couldn't sleep that night, and I was really wrestling with God about what justice looks like, and then for the first time, really what grace was supposed to look like in this situation. And honestly, his wife and his kids were really, really heavy on my heart. And I realized that there's nothing I would get back from what he caused. Like the things that were taken from me and the things that will be hard for me the rest of my life, I don't get any of that back by him going to prison or not. And I realized that the things that he stole from me as a little kid, intimacy and connection and affection, that God was already redeeming those pieces of my heart with my wife and my kids. And I realized that his wife and his kids have probably already been punished enough. And so at his sentencing, I was able to stand up and talk to the judge and share my heart. And I let the judge know that what he deserves is to spend the rest of his life in prison. And I decided to offer him a deal, not because how long ago the abuse happened, because the abuse is just as wrong today as it was years ago when it occurred, and that he deserves to miss out on the special moments in his wife's life, in his kid's life, in the relationship that he would have. He deserves to miss out on all of that when he's in prison. He deserves to pay restitution for the thousands of dollars that I've spent in treatment and counseling to get help for the pain and the scars that he caused, and the treatment that I'll have to go through the rest of my life. And what he deserves, I decided not to give him. And throughout the whole process, I really had to wrestle with pursuing what I felt like he deserved. And I felt like God just reminded me that I was created in his image to reflect his image and his character to the world, and that included my brother. And so in this moment, I was challenged to extend grace and not partial grace. And honestly, as soon as I couldn't sleep that night, and then the next day I reached back out to the district attorney's office and I said, okay, what would it look like if I didn't send my brother to prison? And they went over what that would look like. At that time, they read to me his offense-specific evaluation that was performed. And so in that evaluation, he tried to minimize, and he acknowledged all the abuse while he was a juvenile, but then tried to flip it on me when he was an adult, that somehow I was bigger and stronger, and that's why the abuse happened, was actually my fault, even though he was actually an adult. And for those of you who know me now, when I got sober, when I was right before I turned 22, I started lifting and I was able to put on size. But until that point, I was 6'1" and weighed 135, 40 pounds max. And I was never bigger and stronger than him. I am now. But anyways, even with that, I thought, like, man, like, now he's going to try to flip the story. When I met with him and recorded it, he admitted to my face and apologized. And now that the price is too high, now he's going to deny and minimize what he did. Because the reality is, he abused me hundreds of times, and the worst was when he became an adult, when he was a man, and the repetitive abuse while he was a youth pastor, a youth worship leader, or a worship leader at the church, at multiple churches, while he was a husband and a father. Like, that's the worst. And sure, the abuse started when he was a juvenile, but the worst was when he was an adult. And so despite him now minimizing and trying to deny all of the abuse, that somehow our memories were different now, but they were the same when we were juveniles. Like, he admits to all of it while he was under 18. Anyways, over and over again, I was wrestling with giving him what he deserved, because he didn't deserve any of that. Like, he deserves to miss out on his family. He deserves to spend the rest of his life in prison. But I realized that his wife and his kids don't deserve that. And when I met with my brother and recorded the conversation, he said something to me that stuck out that night that I couldn't sleep. And he mentioned that he was a horrible son, a horrible brother. He's not a great husband. But the one thing he feels like he's done right is being a good dad to his kids. And so I realized that those kids need their dad. And even if he's not a fantastic dad, like, whatever he is to those kids, like, they need him in his life. And so I decided to offer my brother a deal that was still an indeterminate sentence, so it still will last the rest of his natural life. But it was a sex offender intensive supervised probation. The minimum that he could complete it is 10 years, and it is extensive treatment and therapy and help for sex offenders. And I realized my brother never got help. He mentioned in court that, and he got to read a letter to the judge at the sentencing this week, and he mentioned in court that he let my parents know when he was abused by one of our older cousins that had passed away, and that they didn't do anything, and that it was ignored because he had been passed away. And which is sad to me. I don't know if my parents were trying to protect the reputation of their nephew, but I still feel like there's more to the story, because how in the world, I have kids now, how in the world, when you find out that your son has been hurt or that he's abusing his siblings, could you not get them every help? Because how could you not do that? They're your kids. But needless to say, that was his sentencing, and he's going to get to be around his kids. Initially, the judge did state that there is a protection order in place, and until probation can determine that his kids are safe, which I hope that his kids are safe and that he's able to be back around his kids. But until then, he can't communicate with them at all. But ultimately, for me, I feel really good about all of this. A lot of people asked how then I could not send him to prison after all of the years of abuse, but really for me, the most important thing was what God did in my heart throughout all of this. And I didn't allow the enemy to make me bitter and angry and to seek vengeance, and that somehow God used me as an instrument to reflect his grace to my brother, even though he didn't deserve it, because that's how God reflects his grace to all of us. There's many areas of my life where I didn't get what I deserved. And so that's really where everything landed. And so it's over. It's not over for him. Obviously, he has a lot of work ahead of him to complete that program, and a lot of work to probably mend and repair the broken pieces of his immediate family. And our family is completely shattered from the whole transition. Most of us aren't communicating with our parents because of their response or lack of response throughout this process. And your prayers for my brother, that he would be able to move forward and complete this program. Prayers for me and my family, that God would continue to redeem and restore the pieces that are broken in my heart and with all of my siblings. And I don't know what healing looks like throughout all of this, but your prayers would be extremely welcome. And I want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you for everyone who has prayed for me for years since I first came forward with all of this and throughout all of this process. And there was one moment where I realized when I was going to offer my brother a deal, and it just gave me chills, because I realized that there's been people praying that my brother doesn't spend the rest of his life in prison, and he didn't deserve for God to answer that prayer. But somehow God worked in my heart, and because of what God did in my heart, he answered those prayers that my brother's not spending the rest of his life in prison, even though those prayers didn't deserve to be answered. So thank you. Thank you to everyone. And I'm excited to see what God does in my life next.